coming home. As he drove, Matthew thought about all the good times he had on the farm. He had grown up there, playing in the fields and exploring the woods. His family had owned the farm for a long time, and Matthew loved it very much. He loved the old house, the big barn, and the stream that ran through the property. He loved the way the sun rose over the hills in the morning, and the way the stars shone brightly in the sky at night. But as Matthew approached the farm, he started to feel a little nervous. Something didn't feel right. The fields looked a bit overgrown, and the barn looked like it could use a fresh coat of paint. Matthew wondered if everything was okay. Had someone been taking care of the farm while he was away? As he pulled up to the house, Matthew saw that it looked a bit worn out. The porch creaked in the wind, and the windows were dusty. He got out of the truck and walked up to the house, feeling a mix of emotions. He was happy to be home, but he was also worried about what he might find. Matthew walked into the house, calling out to see if anyone was there, but there was no answer. The house was quiet and still, except for the creaking of the old wooden floors. Matthew looked around, taking in the familiar sights and smells of the house. Everything looked a bit dusty and worn out, but it was still home. He walked into the kitchen, where he saw that everything was just as he had left it. The same old table and chairs were still there, and the same old sink and stove. But there was a layer of dust over everything, and the air was stale. Matthew opened a window to let in some fresh air, and then he started to explore the rest of the house. As he walked from room to room, Matthew noticed that everything was just as he had left it, but there was something missing. The house felt empty and quiet, like it was waiting for something to happen. Matthew couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he felt like something was off. After exploring the house, Matthew decided to go out and take a look at the rest of the farm. He walked out to the barn, where he saw that it was in a bit of disrepair. The doors were hanging off their hinges, and the roof was leaking. Matthew made a mental note to fix the barn as soon as possible. As he walked around the farm, Matthew saw that everything was a bit overgrown. The fields were full of weeds, and the stream was choked with debris. But despite the neglect, the farm still looked beautiful. The sun was setting over the hills, casting a golden glow over everything. Matthew felt a sense of peace wash over him as he looked out at the farm. This was his home, and he was glad to be back. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Matthew decided to go back to the house and start getting settled. He was tired from his long drive, and he was looking forward to a good night's sleep. As he walked back to the house, he noticed that the stars were starting to twinkle in the sky. He felt a sense of wonder and awe at the beauty of the world around him. The next morning, Matthew woke up early and started to get to work. He began by fixing the barn, hammering nails and patching up the roof. As he worked, he felt a sense of satisfaction and purpose. This was what he was meant to do: take care of the farm and make it thrive. As the days turned into weeks, Matthew worked hard to get the farm back into shape. He fixed the fences, planted new crops, and tended to the animals. He spent long hours in the sun, working from dawn till dusk. But he didn't mind. He was happy to be back on the farm, doing what he loved. As the weeks turned into months, the farm started to look like its old self again. The fields were green and lush. The barn was fixed, and the animals were healthy and happy. Matthew felt a sense of pride and accomplishment as he looked out at the farm. He had worked hard to get it back into shape, and it had paid off. One day, as Matthew was working in the fields, he saw a figure walking towards him. It was an old man, dressed in overalls and a straw hat. Matthew didn't recognize him, but the old man looked familiar. "Hello there," the old man said, as he approached Matthew. "My name is John. I'm your neighbor from down the road." Matthew shook John's hand, and they started to talk. John told Matthew that he had been keeping an eye on the farm while Matthew was away. He had watered the plants, fed the animals, and even fixed a few things around the house. Matthew was grateful to John for taking care of the farm. He thanked him and asked if he would like to come in for a cup of coffee. John agreed, and they walked back to the house together. As they sat on the porch, sipping their coffee, Matthew asked John about the farm. John told him that it had been a bit of a struggle to keep things going while Matthew was away, but he had done his best, and he was glad to see that Matthew was back to take care of things. Matthew thanked John again, and they sat in silence for a moment, watching the sun set over the hills. It was a peaceful moment, one that Matthew would always remember. As the days turned into weeks, Matthew and John became good friends. They would often sit on the porch, talking and laughing together. Matthew learned a lot from John, who had been farming for many years. He learned about the different types of crops, the best ways to tend to the animals, and the importance of taking care of the land. As the months passed, the farm continued to thrive. Matthew worked hard, but he also had time to enjoy the simple things in life. He would often take walks in the woods, exploring the streams and the wildlife. He would sit on the porch, watching the stars twinkle in the sky, and he would spend time with John, learning and laughing together. Matthew was grateful to be back on the farm, living the life he loved. He was grateful to John for taking care of the farm while he was away, and he was grateful for the peace and tranquility that the farm brought him. He knew that he would never leave the farm again, and he was happy to be home at last. As he drew closer, Matthew's stomach churned. The scale of the construction project revealed itself in a cruel display. It wasn't just a single house being built or a small addition. There were at least 5 large structures taking shape, each in varying stages of completion. Heavy machinery growled in the distance, and construction crews swarmed the site, moving with the precision of ants rushing to and fro. His barn, the sturdy old structure that had witnessed countless sunrises and family gatherings, was gone, replaced by a harsh concrete foundation that felt like a kick in the gut. It was a stark reminder of history being paved over and forgotten. Matthew pulled his truck to a stop at what had once been his familiar property line, now marked by ominous orange cones and chains. His heart was pounding as he took in the scene before him. The air was thick with the smell of freshly cut lumber, sodden earth, and the piercing sting of paint fumes lingering like unwelcome guests. A foreman in a yellow hard hat caught sight of him and waved casually, as if he hadn't just trespassed on a piece of Matthew's life. "I need to talk to you," Matthew said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He stormed over with purpose, his boots crunching on the gravel as he approached the foreman. "Can I help you, sir?" the foreman asked, raising an eyebrow and tilting his head slightly, his expression barely masking his annoyance at the interruption. Matthew crossed his arms over his chest, a posture that both defended his heart and displayed his determination. "What the hell is going on here? This is my land." The words came out like a thunderclap, fueled by the storm of emotions roiling within him. The foreman blinked, appearing momentarily taken aback before regaining his composure. He glanced down at his clipboard, as if searching for an excuse to dismiss Matthew's presence. "This is a new development project authorized by the city. We have the paperwork right here," he said, gesturing to the stacks of documents on his clipboard. "I'd suggest you take it up with the planning department if you have an issue." Matthew shook his head in disbelief, a mix of anger and sadness filling his chest. "Take it up with the planning department? I've been gone for a year, and you folks decide to sweep in and bulldoze my life? My family has owned this land for generations." The foreman shrugged, a practiced nonchalance that only fueled Matthew's anger. "Look, I'm just doing my job. We're following the legal process. There's been a lot of interest in this area, and the city wants to expand. It's not personal." Matthew felt the heat rise to his face, a mix of frustration and helplessness washing over him. "Not personal? This is my home. My memories are here. You don't just get to pave over everything like it doesn't matter." The foreman's expression softened slightly, but it was clear that the machinery of development rolled on without care for individual stories or histories. "I understand it's a tough situation, but these things happen. People are excited about what's coming, and I think you'll find the community is eager for this change. And what about the community that already exists? Matthew shot back. You think they'll be happy to see what you've done to my farm? His voice shook with emotion, demanding acknowledgement for what he knew had been an integral piece of the community fabric. Look, the foreman said, his tone softening just a touch. Nothing is finalized. There might still be room for dialogue. You can come talk to the project manager. They're meeting next week. Maybe there's a way to work something out. Matthew felt a flicker of possibility in his chest, but quickly pushed it aside. Work something out? You've already torn down my barn and began building houses. What could you possibly offer me now? Perhaps compensation? The foreman replied, his tone turning more businesslike. The city is always looking to resolve disputes amicably if possible. There's a process in place to support landowners. Matthew suppressed a snort of disbelief. Compensation? A few dollars would never equate to years of labor and love poured into those fields, into that barn that had sheltered the laughter of family and long summer evenings. You think money can replace my history? You really don't get it, do you? The foreman looked at him. A mixture of confusion and sympathy etched on his face. I'm not trying to dismiss your feelings, but you need to understand that things are changing all around us. This isn't just about you anymore. With that, Matthew turned on his heel and walked back towards his truck, feeling a whirlwind of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. This was not just about loss. It was about the heart of a community, a legacy being stripped away. As he slowly drove away, Matthew's mind whirred with thoughts of what he could do next. He was not ready to give up. The fight for his land and his memories had only just begun. He would reach out to others in the community, rally support, and make sure that his voice was heard. The fight for what was truly his wasn't just about reclaiming his family's legacy. It was about standing firm against progress that disregarded the past. That night, as the stars flickered in the sky like distant lanterns, he laid in bed, a sense of determination coursing through him. He would not let his home vanish into concrete and steel without a fight. He would stand for his land, for the stories hidden in the soil, and for the love that had once flourished there. After all, he thought, no one could take away the roots that ran deep in his heart. The foreman blinked, clearly caught off guard by Matthew's fierce reaction. I think you've got the wrong place. This here is part of the Lakeside Homeowner Association development. Lakeside Homeowner Association? Matthew echoed, his voice strained with disbelief. The name felt foreign and absurd, like some distant echo of a life he didn't recognize. I didn't sell my land. Who gave you the right to build here? The foreman hesitated, uncertainty flickering behind his hard hat. He gestured toward a sleek black SUV parked at the edge of the site, its chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun. You'll want to talk to the project manager about that. He handles all the permits and property stuff. Matthew's heart raced as he stormed toward the SUV, the drive and fury surging through him. Like a predator on the hunt, he refused to back down. A man in a tailored suit stepped out as Matthew approached, exuding confidence. But there was something about his polished demeanor that made Matthew's skin crawl. "Good afternoon," the man said, extending a hand with an easy smile. "I'm David Garrison, project manager for the Lakeside Homeowner Association development. What seems to be the issue?" Ignoring the offered handshake, Matthew's gaze narrowed, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. "The issue is that you're building houses on my property without my permission. What part of that do you not understand?" David's smile faltered for just a moment, surprise flashing in his eyes. "I assure you, Mr. Matthew Larson," he interrupted, emphasizing his name. I am the rightful owner of this land and the legacy that goes with it. You're encroaching on my property." David folded his arms calmly, and despite the heat of Matthew's anger, his voice remained smooth and composed. "Mr. Larson, I understand that the situation is distressing for you, but we have all the necessary permits approved by the city. You should have received a notice about the development several months ago." "A notice?" Matthew's voice rose incredulously. "I was away. I had no idea what was happening here. There's a history that runs deeper than your permits or plans. You can't just bulldoze over everything because it's convenient for you." David regarded him thoughtfully for a moment. "I'm truly sorry to hear that, but unfortunately, the city has deemed this area prime for development, and the Lakeside Homeowner Association has plans in place that were communicated to all adjacent property owners. If you wanted to contest this, you should have done so before construction began." Matthew felt his heart sink. The reality of what was happening settled uncomfortably in his chest. "So, you're saying I've lost any chance to fight back because I was taking care of my family? You think you can just erase my history?" "Mr. Larson, I didn't make the rules," David replied, and there was an edge of impatience in his tone. "I'm merely an agent of progress. The community's interests are at stake here, and sometimes sacrifices must be made for growth." "Sacrifices?" Matthew echoed in disbelief. "You think the memories of my childhood and my family's legacy are sacrifices? For what? Some cookie-cutter houses that don't belong here." The foreman watched the exchange nervously, sensing the tension crackle like electricity in the air. The other workers had paused to observe, curiosity etched on their faces. Matthew could feel their eyes on him, and for a moment he hesitated. Should he keep pushing? Was there even a point? David sighed, a flicker of annoyance crossing his handsome features. "Look, I understand that this is a personal matter for you, but this is a business decision. You are more than welcome to file a formal complaint with the city council or attend the next public forum regarding the project. However, we will continue our work here." Matthew glanced at the construction site, which felt like a graveyard of dreams and memories under construction, then back at David. "As long as I breathe, I won't stand by and let you erase my history. If you think you can proceed without consequence, you're mistaken." With that, Matthew turned away, storming back toward his truck. He climbed in, the vehicle feeling like a protective shell that could shield him from the realities he faced. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, fighting the urge to shout or throw something. Anger surged through him, mixed with a sense of vulnerability. The fight was only just beginning. He took a deep breath, letting the air fill his lungs before stepping on the gas. The wheels crunched against the gravel as he backed away from his past being torn apart. It was time to gather the community, to get support, to raise his voice. He wouldn't allow his family's legacy to be bulldozed without a fight. They had built this farm, each nail and plank telling a story, and he was determined to keep telling that story no matter what obstacles lay ahead. As he drove away, he could barely contain his emotions, rage, sadness, and resolve. There would be a reckoning, and he would make sure that his voice was heard this time. This was not over, not by a long shot. The discussion had spiraled into a storm of accusations, and as the tension thickened, so did the realization that Matthew's voice seemed small against the machinery of progress. David remained steadfast, the practiced smoothness of his responses designed to deflect any challenge to the decisions made by people who never met Matthew, never understood the life he had built on that land. All the permits were acquired legally, David reiterated, the confidence in his tone suggesting a man who believed the whole situation was beyond reproach. Matthew's frustration mounted as he pulled out every document he had at his disposal, deeds, tax records, maps, all the papers that underscored his rightful claim to the land. "You're telling me these mean nothing? This land has been in my family for generations, and you come in here with your permits and think it gives you the right to claim it." David, however, remained detached, merely stating, "As long as the paperwork indicates that the city approved the development, there's nothing more I can do." I suggest you consult your legal team. I'll be talking to my lawyer, Matthew muttered, turning on his heel and making his way back to his truck, the weight of defeat resting heavy on his shoulders. The drive back to town was nothing less than a barrage of questions. Each turn of the wheel felt like a reminder of the stakes at hand. How had this happened? Who was responsible for the oversight? Had he really been so consumed by his family matters that he overlooked critical communication about his property? Most importantly, how could he stop it? They couldn't take his land. He would make sure of that. As he pulled into his driveway under the increasingly darkening sky, a sense of urgency fueled him. The sun had set, casting shadows across his home that felt foreboding. He parked the truck and sat behind the wheel for a moment, gathering his thoughts. His house, his sanctuary, loomed in the twilight. It had been a refuge through the ups and downs of life, filled with memories of laughter and warmth that felt more pressing than ever in that moment. He stepped out, heart heavy but resolved. Inside, he flipped on the lights that illuminated the simple rooms, their familiar contours bringing him a sense of comfort despite the urgency of the situation. He made a beeline for his desk, scattered with papers, past family photos, and remnants of his quiet life. With a deep, grounding breath, Matthew realized he needed more than just legal consultation. He needed a strategy. He picked up his phone, thumbs hovering over the screen, a gnawing determination rising within him. First, he needed a lawyer, one who knew land disputes and had a history of fighting for property rights. He scrolled through his contacts, searching for options, when he paused at an old name, Sarah Bennett. Sarah had been a childhood friend, equally passionate about defending the land and its history. She had gone on to become a reputable attorney, known for her fierce dedication to property rights and her unwavering support for local communities. Matthew hesitated at first, calling an old friend who had moved on to a successful career, but his resolve overpowered uncertainty. He dialed the number, his heart racing. "Hey, Sarah, it's Matthew Larson," he said when she picked up, the familiarity of her voice easing his tension. "I need your help. Matthew, it's been ages. What's going on?" Sarah's warmth spread through the lines of the call, but Matthew's voice quickly turned serious. "I've got a situation I need to discuss. It's about my land. There's a construction project happening, and it appears they're claiming my property. I need legal advice." Like yesterday, there was a brief pause, the concern in Sarah's voice palpable when she replied, "That sounds serious. I'm here for you. Let's meet tomorrow morning. I can look into any documents you have. We'll figure it out." "Thank you, Sarah. I really appreciate it," he said, hope igniting within him. The conversation continued, but Matthew felt a growing resolve as they exchanged details. He could rally support, gather his evidence, and take the first steps toward ensuring that his family's legacy wasn't erased overnight. Once he hung up, Matthew went to the attic, the musty scent of old wood greeting him like an embrace. Throughout his childhood, that attic had been a treasure trove of memories, filled with forgotten relics. He rummaged through boxes of old photographs, newspapers, and cobweb-covered trinkets, determined to find something, anything, that could help him illustrate the value of the land beyond legalities, the stories written through generations. As the night deepened, he uncovered pictures of family gatherings, a young Matthew splashing in the creek, and his grandmother tending flowers in a garden that now lay beneath concrete. Each piece unearthed stoked the fire inside him, memories igniting like kindling. He would compile these stories, these snapshots of life, into a narrative that showcased the heart of the land, the heart of his family. By morning, he would not only have legal support, but also a collection of evidence that captured the essence of what was at stake. With renewed purpose coursing through him, Matthew spent the rest of the night going through old boxes and documents, wrapping himself in the stories that had shaped him. He would not let his history slip away quietly. Tomorrow marked the beginning of a fight, one fueled by love, legacy, and the memories etched into every inch of his cherished land. Matthew leaned forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The stakes had risen significantly since his revelation, and now it felt as if 1,000 threads of his family's history were hanging in the balance. "I want to see everything," he reiterated, his voice steady but urgent. "Every document that includes my property, every map, every email, every meeting note related to the rezoning. If this is going to be a fight, I need to arm myself with knowledge." Paul shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly realizing just how momentous this request could be. "All right, give me a moment," he said, turning to his computer. The sound of keys clicked through the otherwise silent room as Matthew's mind raced. He could hardly believe it. His land taken away, given up in the shadows of bureaucracy, without him ever being informed. The implications were heavy. It wasn't just about him anymore. His father's laughter rang through his mind, recounting tales of family picnics on those very grounds, his mother planting flowers, his siblings racing to the creek echoing joy in the long summer days. No, this was about his family, their roots tangled deep in the soil that his ancestors cultivated, the tales of triumph and struggle woven into the very fabric of the land. Paul returned moments later with a folder brimming with papers. He set it down in front of Matthew with a hint of unease. "Okay, here we go. These are the records you requested. Some of it may not seem directly relevant, but you can go through them and see what might apply to your situation." Matthew opened the file, his eyes scanning the printed documents. Except for the first few pages, everything else looked convoluted, filled with technical terms and drawings that might as well have been written in a foreign language. Charts outlined property lines and town maps showed proposed developments, but it wasn't until he reached a series of emails tucked at the back of the folder that something caught his eye. The first email was from the Neighborhood Association to the Zoning Committee, urging them to expedite the rezoning project due to overwhelming community support. Matthew's brow furrowed. Had they even consulted the community? Had they spoken to the families that lived and breathed that land? Continuing on, he noticed another email, a more recent one, where the committee responded to complaints about oversight in the mapping of the area. A shadow of concern crossed Matthew's thoughts. Why hadn't he heard of this before? Had others known about his predicament? Had anyone taken action on his behalf? Paul observed Matthew intently as he combed through the documents, perhaps gauging his reactions, perhaps feeling a bit of the weight of the situation. "Are you okay? If you have questions, I can—" Matthew looked up, cutting him off. "This all feels so careless. These emails show that even the people in your office are concerned about the inaccuracies in these documents. How could my property become just another line on a map without anyone notifying me?" Paul adjusted his glasses and leaned forward, quietly maintaining his professional demeanor. "It's not ideal, I know, but administrative processes get complicated. There was a lot going on with lakeside development, and I can assure you, very few community members near your land was involved. You must understand, these things often slip through the cracks." Frustration simmered within Matthew, but he pressed on. "I've lived on that land. I see it every day. How can you all just overlook a family's home, a community's heart, without a second thought? You have a responsibility to your constituents. This isn't just a business transaction." Paul sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "That's precisely why I want to help you. You need to gather support. If you can rally people within your community, it will give you more leverage against the association and the developments." Matthew pondered Paul's advice, feeling a glimmer of hope. If they truly hadn't communicated his property's inclusion effectively, maybe others were in a similar situation. "I need to speak with my neighbors," he said, thoughts racing. "If this is happening to me, it could easily affect them as well." "That's a great place to start," Paul encouraged with a slight nod. "Check if any of them received notices. If they can stand with you, the homeowner association will have a more challenging time justifying their claims." As much as he was feeling the weight of a legal battle gathering upon him, Matthew also began to feel a warmth similar to the nurturing embrace of the sun. People coming together, a community rising. He could mobilize the local families and save not just his land, but the shared spirit of their neighborhood. "I'll do it," he declared. "I'll organize a meeting and inform everyone affected, including the people living near the lakeside area. If we all rise to fight this together, they might have no choice but to listen." "That's a strong approach," Paul said, his demeanor shifting slightly from glaze to eagerness. "If you can show that there's real community anguish over these plans, you may have more legal weight behind you. Getting yourself a lawyer that specializes in property disputes, like Ms. Bennett, is also essential. Document everything you can while you still have the time." "Right. I need to compile all of this," Matthew mumbled, flipping through pages until an idea crystallized before him. "I need to build a case, a narrative, not just about the land's legal ownership, but its significance. I want to show that this isn't just about property lines. It's about maintaining the culture, history, and memories tied to those grounds." "Exactly," Paul emphasized, enthusiasm brightening his voice. "Gather photographs, stories, evidence of your family's legacy, and share them with the community. Show them what is at stake." "I think I know just how to approach this," Matthew replied softly, bolstered by renewed inspiration. The threads of the past could weave themselves into a connection that generations would uphold together. He stood up with determination, fueled by a charge not just to reclaim his land, but to reinvigorate a community. "Thank you, Paul. I'll be back." "Good luck, Mr. Larson. Make sure you keep in touch as you move forward," Paul said as Matthew headed toward the door, sensing that the battle was just beginning. As Matthew exited the zoning office, the world felt different. The streets were bathed in sunlight, a vibrant energy flowing through the town. He didn't just feel like a lone figure against the machine. He was ready to gather allies, friends, family, and neighbors who could join the cause. With a firm resolve in his heart, Matthew drove back home, fueled with purpose. The fight ahead would be daunting, yes, but it would also be a chance for him to not only reclaim his property, but his heritage. And as he prepared to organize a community meeting that would unite their voices, he could already envision the warmth radiating through that room, carrying with it stories of laughter, love, and the indomitable spirit of the land they all held dear. That afternoon, he began drafting flyers, creating a story and a vision that would resonate with every neighbor. He pored over old family photos, capturing moments that spanned decades. As he worked, hope blossomed alongside the rising urgency. It was not just about a battle for land. It was about preserving a part of their collective soul, a sacred bond that could not be severed by mere paperwork and bureaucratic oversight. As the days turned into a blur of meetings and frantic phone calls, Matthew felt the tension in his chest tightening like a vice. Paul's guidance had helped him file the correction request with the county records office, and he had successfully secured Barbara Klein, a formidable lawyer renowned for her expertise in property disputes. Despite her initial confidence and sharp wit, there was an unsettling sense of urgency in the air. She could sense the impending threat and knew that time was not on their side. "So, we'll file a cease and desist order today," Barbara said as she paced her cramped office filled with books on law and land use. "That should halt any further construction until we can get a court date and present our case. You're not the only one who's been affected. I'll also contact the Homeowners Association to formally challenge their claims." But as if to mock their efforts, Matthew found himself staring through the chain-link fence that separated him from the construction site that invasive morning, his heart pounding with disbelief. Heavy machinery rumbled, and the rhythmic pounding of hammers echoed like a drumbeat of impending doom. The foreman barked orders to the crew, completely oblivious to the distress of the land's rightful owner. "This is madness," Matthew shouted, stepping closer to the site, anger surging through him. You can't just demolish something that isn't yours. The foreman, a burly man with a weathered face, looked up, taken aback for just a moment before shrugging off Matthew's words. These are the orders, buddy. We have a project timeline, and we're behind schedule. He casually waved toward the blueprints folded under his arm. Those maps don't lie. They don't lie. Matthew challenged, incredulous. Those maps are wrong. You're trespassing on my property, and you're claiming it's because of an error. At that, the foreman only narrowed his eyes, his body language suggesting a blend of irritation and apathy. Not my problem. Your argument is with the county, not me. I'm just here to do my job. In that moment, Matthew felt a rush of helplessness. He gritted his teeth, steeling himself against the frustration that threatened to consume him. I don't care if you're just following orders, he shot back. I'll have you know that I've filed a legal complaint against this project, and the construction needs to stop immediately. Noticing the commotion, various crew members paused, murmuring amongst themselves with puzzled expressions. Matthew's bluster felt momentarily surreal. A man standing alone, surrounded by the machinery of destruction, battling against an industry that had set its sights on what he believed was rightfully his. The foreman, however, showed no signs of backing down. Legal complaints take time, my friend. We've got a contract to fulfill. If you want to make a scene, you'll need to take it up with someone who's actually in charge. He pointed dismissively toward a trailer on site, where the project manager was stationed. Fury bubbled beneath Matthew's skin as he felt the weight of those words, feeling more like a small fish floundering in a vast, unforgiving ocean. He turned away from the foreman, heart racing with anger, realizing how underestimated he had been in this fight. But he could not let the flood of despair swallow him. There were people to rally, stories to tell, and tangible action he needed to take. With a mixture of resolve and urgency coursing through him, Matthew stormed off the construction site, heading back to his car. His thoughts propelled him forward. He needed to mobilize the community quickly, and he needed to showcase the urgency of the fight at hand. He couldn't do this alone. Before Matthew reached his car, he decided to make a detour to the local cafe where he knew many of his neighbors congregated. If he could rally them, if they could see for themselves that their homes were under threat, maybe they could influence the legal outcome. They had to come together as a team, not just for his land, but for everyone's right to their history and heritage. As the bell above the cafe door chimed softly, Matthew stepped inside, feeling the comforting warmth and aroma of fresh coffee envelop him. The chatter of locals filled the air, laughter mixing with conversations about their daily lives. He could see a few familiar faces and quickly made his way over to a large table where several neighbors sat. "Hey, everyone. Sorry to interrupt," he said, raising his voice just enough to grab their attention. "I need to talk to you all about something important." The buzz of conversation dwindled, replaced by curious looks and whispers. "What's going on, Matthew?" asked Jessica, a longtime neighbor who had lived on their street nearly as long as he had. Matthew cleared his throat, glancing at the faces of his friends and neighbors, each one a piece of the puzzle that made up their community. "It's about the construction taking place at the lakeside development," he said fervently. "They're trying to take my property. No, they already are taking it because of a clerical error. I filed a legal complaint, and I've hired a lawyer. But they've come back to hammer away at my land regardless." The murmurs resumed again, expressions of disbelief, concern, and outrage, a ripple effect dancing across the table. "That's outrageous," cried Carlos, another neighbor, clenching his fists. "What can we do? I'm organizing a meeting to discuss it." "I really need all of you there," Matthew urged. "If we can show the Homeowners Association that we're united and that we're standing up for our community, we can challenge this. It's not just about my land. This is about all of us." "But what about the meeting with the Homeowners Association?" Jessica asked, her brow furrowing. "If they see a crowd gathering, won't they turn it against you?" Matthew shook his head, determined. "They need to know we're not going to let them trample over our rights and our history because of a mistake made on a map. I'm calling everyone who's affected, near and far, through social media, flyers, word of mouth. We're going to show them it's not just my fight, that this concerns everyone who lives here. He could see sparks of resolve flicker in their eyes. One by one, they nodded, glancing around the table, recognizing the importance of his words. "Count me in," said another neighbor. "I've seen all the trucks parked outside, and my kids keep asking why there's construction happening where they used to play." "Same here," Carlos added. "We used to walk down to that creek every summer. A lot of memories are tied to that land. We need to fight back." The conversation continued to flow, fueled by passion and a sense of urgency. Matthew felt the tide turning, his hope buoyed by the shared outrage of his neighbors coming together for a purpose. Each person began offering ideas, suggestions, and resources, wanting to contribute to efforts reinforcing the bond of community, their community. As they strategized, thoughts of the upcoming battle swirled in Matthew's mind. The legal maneuvers would not come easy. They would be a grueling process of back and forth negotiations and courtroom battles. But he felt a sense of assurance now. He was not fighting alone. There was power in numbers, and they were rising together, ready to confront the challenges before them. The sun rose high over Lakeside, casting golden beams through the trees, illuminating the faces of the gathered crowd. Matthew stood at the edge of his property, where freshly painted signs declaring, "Save our community," and "No more mistakes," fluttered in the gentle breeze. He had never felt more emboldened, surrounded by neighbors who were not just friends but fellow warriors in a fight that went beyond the confines of legal disputes. It was about their history, identity, and the land that mirrored their joys and sorrows. Weeks had passed since that pivotal meeting at the cafe. The grassroots effort swelled in momentum. Flyers had been strategically placed around town. Social media efforts flourished with hashtags like #LakesideUnity. And within the local churches and schools, families began discussing the impending changes, rallying against the threat looming over their homes. As he watched the crowd of supporters grow, Matthew felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Countless donations had poured in from neighbors, local businesses, and families he had never met, all eager to contribute to a cause that was undeniably larger than himself. Some offered homemade snacks for the rally, others volunteered time to help draft letters to local authorities, and a few even set up a GoFundMe page to cover the unexpected mounting legal fees. It was heartening to witness the depths of their commitment. Then it happened. A few days ago, a local news station had picked up on the story and scheduled interviews with Matthew and Barbara to discuss the ongoing saga. It gained traction quickly, drawing attention from nearby cities and the surrounding communities. The spin on it was captivating, an underdog story that had the undeniable appeal of conflict. David versus Goliath became a theme reporters were eager to push, and Matthew found himself on the news, heart thrumming in his chest as he spoke about the potential loss of not just land, but of their heritage. That's right, Matthew had said on camera, his voice steady and passionate. "This isn't just about me or my property. It's about what we leave behind. This land is our history, our childhood memories, and the vibrant life we built. We deserve a say in our community's future." With the momentum building, the day of the rally had finally arrived. As local residents filled the makeshift space behind the old oak tree, a spot steeped in their shared memories of barbecues, parties, and family gatherings, Matthew felt a swell of appreciation for all those who came. The unmistakable spirit of solidarity wafted through the air. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, standing in front of a table filled with pamphlets, legal documents, and maps they had printed out. This is a moment where we stand together, united against the forces that threaten our community. It's time to make our voices heard, to show them that we won't let our homes be decided without our input. Applause erupted around him. Neighbors shouted affirmations, echoing his sentiment. Jennifer, the spirited mother from 2 doors down, waved her hands, rallying the crowd with infectious enthusiasm. This is our home, our sanctuary. We have to protect it, she shouted, and the crowd responded in kind. One by one, more voices chimed in. Stories shared about picnics near the creek, children playing in backyards, and the traditions that had cemented their bond as a neighborhood. These heartfelt testimonies reflected the very essence of their fight. It was about doing everything in their power to halt the encroachment on their lives and protect the land holding their collective legacy. And with every story shared, Matthew watched the power of collective memory mold into strength. The crowd seemed to swell with each person who stepped up to speak, bringing tears to Matthew's eyes. It was raw, genuine, and electrifying, a testament to their united spirit. An air of anticipation lingered. Matthew had arranged for Barbara to join them for a brief Q&A session, strategically paving the way for legal advice and clarity on how they could further mobilize their efforts moving forward. As she arrived, the crowd hushed, eager to listen. Barbara stepped to the front, her presence radiating confidence. Thank you for gathering today to display your solidarity. I want you all to know that we are making strides in our legal battle, she announced. The cease and desist order is currently in effect, preventing any further work on the site. And due to the overwhelming evidence Matthew and the community have provided, we have laid the groundwork for a strong case. Gasps of surprise and excitement rippled through the crowd. That's amazing, shouted a voice in the back, accompanied by cheers of encouragement. Let's keep pushing. As the discussion expanded, Barbara detailed the next steps they would take, urging people to keep collecting documentation, photographs, and memories of their beloved land. We need to continue showcasing what is at stake. If they notice the community is consistently engaged, they will think twice before bulldozing through its very soul. The crowd erupted again, excitement electrifying the air. By the time the rally concluded, the sun had set behind the hills, the sky painted in hues of orange and purple. Friends and neighbors lingered, sharing stories and laughter, united in their determination. The faces around Matthew glowed with camaraderie, and he felt a connection far deeper than they had experienced even during the toughest of times. As the last of the attendees began to filter out, Matthew gathered the remaining flyers and leftovers, feeling grateful yet buoyed by the support he had received. He saw Barbara chatting with some of the neighbors and realized how crucial she was to the endeavor, an invigorating presence who deftly combined legal expertise with compassionate understanding. "Hey, Matthew," she called out as she approached him. "I wanted to see how you felt about tonight. Quite the turnout, huh?" Matthew grinned widely. "I can't believe it. This has been surreal. I didn't expect this much engagement. It's amazing what happens when everyone is united. I feel like we've ignited a fire." Barbara smiled knowingly. "You've been a driving force, Matthew. You believed in your cause, and that belief resonates with your community. The strength is within them, and is now being voiced loud and clear." "I guess David might just have a fair shot against Goliath after all," Matthew responded, a newfound confidence radiating through him. "Exactly," Barbara said, reassured by his words. "But remember, this is only the beginning. The momentum is on your side, and now we need to capitalize on it. Stay passionate. Harness that spirit. Together, we'll make this community louder than ever." The weeks turned into months of intense preparations, filled with gatherings, discussions, and shared stories as they honed their strategy. It was a dance of community resilience, deftly intertwining the threads of law, memory, and hope. It became a symphony of their collective aspirations as they fought to protect the land that had cradled their lives. And with every passing day, Matthew felt more certain. The outcome of this fight would not merely define his property, but would echo throughout their community, shaping the future for generations to come. They were building something stronger than what could be laid down in concrete. They were cementing their legacy through shared commitment and unwavering defiance. A community rallying, a force to be reckoned with. Chapter 8. The Courtroom Drama. The sun rose on a crisp autumn day, casting a golden hue over the small town of Lakeside. Excitement buzzed in the air as the day of the trial finally arrived. People in the community had been talking about it for weeks, and now they gathered in the courthouse, ready to witness a story that would shape the future of their beloved town. Matthew sat at the plaintiff's table, his stomach a whirlwind of nerves. Next to him, his lawyer, Barbara, radiated calmness, reviewing her notes as she prepared for the day ahead. As the gavel came down and the judge entered, Matthew felt a rush of determination. Today wasn't just about him. It was about preserving the land that had been in his family for generations. The opposing counsel stood tall at the other table, oozing confidence. He was known for his silver tongue and sharp wit. "Your Honor," he began, "the land in question is not just a piece of property. It represents progress for our community. We must move forward." Barbara stood up for the first time and asked the judge for permission to call her first witness. The judge nodded, and Matthew felt a rush of anticipation. His heart raced as Barbara called him to the stand. He walked to the witness box, trying to remember to breathe. The room fell silent, and every eye was on him. "Matthew," Barbara began, her voice warm, "please tell the court about your connection to this property." "It means everything to me," Matthew started, his voice steady despite his nerves. "This land has been in my family for over 100 years. My grandfather built the house where I grew up. It's filled with memories, family gatherings, summer spent playing in the fields, and the laughter echoing off the walls." Barbara nodded, encouraging him to continue. "What did you feel when you learned about the proposed development?" she asked. Matthew hesitated, summoning the emotions he had kept bottled up. "When I found out, I felt devastated. I realized that if it were to be taken away, it wouldn't just be a loss of property. It would mean losing a piece of my family's legacy, our connection to the past and our identity as a community." The gallery was silent as Matthew spoke. He glanced at some familiar faces, old friends, neighbors, and members of the community who were all fighting alongside him. Their support felt like a lifeline. The opposing lawyer rose to cross-examine Matthew, and his voice dripped with sarcasm. "Mr. Larkin, your family owned this land for many years, yet it has remained largely undeveloped. How do you justify fighting progress when you've allowed it to remain untouched?" Matthew took a deep breath, feeling the pressure but standing firm. Preserving this land isn't about resisting progress. It's about honoring the history and the community that has grown around it. Just because something has been untouched doesn't mean it lacks value. It's about finding a balance between progress and preservation. The opposing counsel shrugged, clearly unconvinced. "And what about the new jobs and economic opportunities that this development will bring?" Matthew's heart raced, but he was ready for this question. The community can grow without sacrificing our roots. We can create jobs and economic opportunities while still valuing the places that define us. We must find a way to progress that honors our history, not erases it. Barbara rested a reassuring hand on Matthew's shoulder as he stepped down from the witness stand. They'd practiced for moments like this, and now Matthew felt he had made his point. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, but he sensed the jury's engagement, an understanding growing around the importance of the land. As the day continued, more witnesses testified. Neighbors shared stories of the community events held on that land. Summer picnics, holiday gatherings, and children running free in the fields. The life that thrived, there was a testimony to the love and connection among everyone present. One elderly neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, stood up next. With a nostalgic smile, she spoke warmly. "I remember the first time I visited the Larkin farm as a little girl. They welcomed us with open arms, and we spent afternoons picking apples and sitting on the porch. It's been a gathering place for so many families. A piece of history we can't just pave over." The jury listened, rapt with attention. It wasn't just Matthew fighting for his family's past. It was every person who had created a memory on that land. Barbara used photographs to illustrate their points. A family reunion, a picnic, a group of children playing hide-and-seek among the trees. These images painted a picture of joy, laughter, and community. As the afternoon wore on, tension hung in the air like a heavy fog. Barbara prepared for her closing arguments and focused on the strength of their community. Your Honor, we are not primal forces fighting against change, but guardians of memory and identity. Today's trial isn't just about one piece of land. It's about what it means to all of us who call Lakeside home. The judge listened intently as Barbara elaborated on the idea of preserving their history for future generations. This land has shaped us, and we owe it to ourselves and our children to safeguard what means so much. We can grow, but it should not come at the cost of our heritage. As the day came to a close, the gavel struck, and the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. Families embraced one another, voices low but filled with hope. Matthew felt a surge of emotion wash over him. He had fought for something greater than just keeping a piece of land. As they filed out of the courtroom, Matthew turned to Barbara, gratitude shining in his eyes. Thank you for believing in this cause, in all of us. Barbara smiled back. It was a team effort. You all shared your stories. Together, you created a vision of your community's future that can't be ignored. Stepping out into the fresh air, Matthew looked around at the familiar faces. In that moment, he felt something powerful, unity. Whatever the verdict would be, it had brought them all together in a way that surpassed anything he could have imagined. The battle was fierce, but the community had shown their strength, and they would continue to stand together for what truly mattered. Through laughter, memories, and shared history, they had created a foundation that would endure no matter what lay ahead. With the court ruling in his favor, Matthew felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The battle for the land had been arduous, filled with doubt and fear, but the verdict brought a light of hope. Now, however, he faced an even greater challenge: the task of restoring his land, a process that would take both time and dedication. As the sun rose each day, Matthew poured himself into the work. He was determined to heal the wounds left by the conflict and to restore not just the physical structures, but the essence of the farm that had been a cornerstone of his family history. The first priority was the barn, which had stood tall for generations, witnessing countless memories of laughter, love, and hard work. It had become dilapidated and needed to be rebuilt, honoring its legacy while embracing a new era. The sound of hammers ringing and saws buzzing echoed across the fields as construction began. Matthew worked alongside local volunteers, friends, family, and neighbors who had rallied around him during the trial. There was a sense of camaraderie and purpose as they labored together, sharing stories of the barn's past. Each nail they drove into the wood echoed with a shared commitment to preserving their community's identity. Weekends turned into festivals of hard work and joy. On one sunny Saturday, the community gathered to raise the barn's frame. Each person was handed a piece of the structure, and as they hoisted the beams into place, Matthew could feel the spirit of the old barn intertwining with the spirit of the new. Laughter filled the air, and as the last beam was secured, cheers erupted. The barn was no longer just a building. It was a testament to resilience and unity. With the barn rebuilding nearing completion, Matthew envisioned more than just a barn for livestock and storage. He wanted it to be a space for the community to gather. He decided to design it to include a large open area for events, family reunions, harvest festivals, and community meetings. The barn would become a center for the community, a place filled with warmth and memories. As weeks turned into months, the farm began to thrive once more. The fields were replanted with crops, and the vibrant colors of the growing vegetables and flowers brought life back to the land. Local families visited, picking fresh produce and enjoying the beauty of the restored farm. With the new barn standing proud, it became a symbol of resilience for the community. They held gatherings and celebrations on weekends, potlucks, dances, and seasonal fairs. Children ran freely in the fields while parents caught up over hearty meals shared under the vast blue sky. During these gatherings, the stories of the old barn blended seamlessly with the new memories they were creating together. Matthew often found himself standing at the edge of the fields, watching the laughter of children as they played, feeling a surge of gratitude for what the community had accomplished together. One particularly memorable evening, they held their first official barn dance, a tradition dating back decades. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow around the space. The air was filled with music and laughter, and Matthew noticed how the barn whispered tales of the past to the present, allowing both old and young to come together in celebration. As the night wore on, Matthew stood at the center of the dance floor, holding his sister's hand as they twirled and spun. The joyous sounds of fiddles and laughter enveloped him, and he felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment wash over him. The barn, once a crumbling reminder of loss and threats, had transformed into a vibrant symbol of life, hope, and unity. During a quieter moment of the dance, Matthew took a step back and observed the faces around him. Friends old and new danced. Children chased one another, and the smell of food mingled with fresh hay. Overwhelmed with appreciation, he took a moment to reflect on how far they had all come. This is what we fought for, he thought. Not just for the land, but for the heart of our community. As the farm flourished, Matthew began to expand his vision. He started a community garden project beside the barn, inviting families to plant vegetables and herbs. "Let's grow together," he said with a smile, as children excitedly dug in the soil, learning about nature and the importance of nurturing life. The garden became not just a source of food, but also a place of education and connection. Workshops were organized, teaching everything from planting and harvesting to cooking healthy meals. Seasons change, and with each passing year, the farm blossomed, both in crops and in heart. The community continued to rally around the farm, allowing Matthew to create an enduring legacy rooted in resilience, unity, and love. They hosted seasonal festivals, apple picking in the fall, spring flower fairs, and summer barbecues, each event stitching a tighter bond among neighbors and friends. The barn stood prominent amidst the fields, a magnificent structure that housed not only tools and hay, but also memories. Matthew adorned its walls with photographs that chronicled milestones, children's faces smeared with dirt from playing, families laughing over shared meals, and the ever-important harvest that symbolized their hard work. On those quiet evenings, as the sun set behind the rolling hills, illuminating the sky in shades of orange and pink, Matthew often found himself on the porch of his house, gazing at the barn in the distance. He felt proud and grateful for the support of his community and the strength of their shared stories. The journey had not been easy, but it had brought them closer than ever, reminding him that the greatest legacies are built by those who stand together. And so, as seasons turned and years went by, Matthew Larkin's farm transformed from a land threatened by development into a flourishing sanctuary, a legacy not just of his family, but of all the families that loved and cherished the land as their own. The barn, rich with history and laughter, would forever be a beacon of hope, resilience, and connection, welcoming generations to come. One evening, as Matthew stood on his porch looking out over the land that had been both a battleground and a sanctuary, he felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm glow that bathed the fields in golden light, transforming the shadows of the past into a tapestry of hope and renewal. The struggles, the sleepless nights, and the fight for justice had all led him here. The land was his once again, just as it had been for generations. It was a defining moment, one that solidified his connection to the land and to the legacy of his family. The trials and tribulations had not only shaped the landscape around him, but had also forged a new purpose within him. With the ruling in his favor and the community united behind him, Matthew found himself stepping into a role he had never imagined. Months after the barn dance, Matthew began to receive calls and visits from neighboring farmers and friends who were facing their own challenges. Emboldened by his experience, he realized he had a voice that could inspire hope and action. Many were struggling against encroaching developments and the threat of losing their land, much like he had once faced. One evening, under a starlit sky, Matthew organized a gathering around the newly built barn. He invited fellow farmers, local landowners, and community members to share their stories. They sat on hay bales, the sound of crickets filling the night air, as they exchanged tales of resilience and determination. Matthew listened intently as neighbors recounted their own battles and shared insights, how they had come together in times of hardship, how they supported one another, and how they cherished their heritage. When it was his turn to speak, Matthew stood tall, heart pounding with a mix of passion and purpose. We are not alone in our struggles. Together, we can create a force powerful enough to protect what matters. Our voices can inspire change, not just for ourselves, but for the generations that will come after us. The room echoed with whispers of agreement, a ripple of solidarity spreading through the crowd. Inspired by the stories shared that night, Matthew decided to form a community organization focused on land preservation and agricultural sustainability. He believed that by educating others about their rights and resources, they could empower more people to stand up against threats to their farmlands and heritage. With the support of his neighbors, he organized workshops and educational seminars covering key issues such as land rights, conservation practices, and sustainable farming methods. They invited experts in agronomy and environmental science to speak, showcasing the importance of preserving the land not only for the farmers, but for the entire community and the world at large. As the months turned to years, the organization grew, engaging more farmers, families, and local businesses. Matthew became a respected voice in the community, advocating for policies that favored sustainable practices and land conservation. The passion that had once driven him in his personal fight now fed into a greater mission, inspiring a movement that resonated far beyond the borders of Lakeside. The friendship and bonds forged during that initial battle now blossomed into a powerful network of advocacy. The struggle had been hard-fought, but it had birthed something beautiful, a community that understood the value of standing together, of collective strength and shared purpose. One sunny afternoon, as Matthew walked through the fields with his children, he reflected on how far they had come. The crops were thriving, and the laughter of his kids echoed through the rows of vegetables they had planted together. This land was now more than just a family farm. It was a beacon of hope and resilience, a place where dreams could take root and flourish. He looked out toward the horizon, where the rolling hills met the sky, painted with hues of orange and purple as the sun began to set. It was a new dawn, not only for the Larson family farm, but for every family that called this land home. The battle was won, yes, but the victory was ever evolving. With each passing day, the narrative of what their community could achieve together continued to unfurl. As he knelt down beside his children, showing them how to plant seeds into the earth, he realized this was a legacy he wished to cultivate. The knowledge that the land, like life, needed nurturing, respect, and love. In that moment, Matthew understood deeply that his fight had resulted not just in preserving a piece of land, but in fostering the spirit of connection and commitment that would ensure its future. This was just the beginning of a new chapter for the Larson family farm. The struggles they had endured had only strengthened their roots, and together with the community, they would continue to grow, united in their mission to protect their heritage and embrace the promise of what lay ahead. With the dawn of each new day painting the sky, Matthew felt invigorated, ready to write the next pages of their story. One filled with hope, unity, and the joy of a life cherished and shared amidst the fields they loved.